My name's Victoria Bedford and I'm a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist and I have a fear of failure. Whew, there, I said it. I'm owning it. And this is what this video is going to be about today. And it's really ironic because as I'm reflecting back on what I said in my last video when I was talking about somatic therapy, and in that video I was saying at the beginning, I want to start being more at ease in front of the camera. I want to stop being so stressed about doing these videos because I know I have a lot to bring, but there was so much pressure. So I videoed that on the moors and I felt so much freedom as I was doing that. But obviously since then, there has been some triggers that I have faced, which has opened up the next level of healing for me, which is I am a perfectionist and I have a fear of failure. So my name is Victoria Bedford and I'm a spiritual alchemist, helping to empower others to heal from trauma, from wounds that they have been through, by understanding the mind, the body and the soul. And how do I do that? Well, I myself have been through a traumatic childhood. I had a father of alcohol addiction. I had a father who was emotionally unavailable, but also shouted a lot, had high expectations, was violent and sexually abusive during alcohol. And the majority of this I suppressed for many, many years and didn't realise had affected me until I had my major breakdown in 2015. And there is a small video at the beginning of my YouTube explaining a bit of this. It feels weird to relax myself enough to not put pressure on trying to be perfect in front of the camera, because that isn't easy. Which is really, really weird because on Facebook, I do lots and lots of videos. I do lots and lots of lives. But what I'm going to talk about in a moment is how when you're a perfectionist, you don't really like change. And anything that's out of your comfort zone is going to make any symptoms exasperated. So I'm going to be talking today about how did I find out I had perfectionism, because I never believed I had, ever. You know, I'm a spiritual teacher. And the reason why I spiritually teach is because I work from the things that I've gone through in my own life. From the traumas that I have healed. You know, and there were a lot. From traumas in childhood, I then picked partners who were sexually abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, and cheated on me. So I was replicating a lot of my childhood in adulthood with partners. And look, I can't blame all of my partners because there was parts of me that attracted them, so there was toxicity within me that I hadn't recognised. Well, because guess what? When you go through trauma, you learn to adapt to life in unhealthy ways. They're coping mechanisms. You learn to build coping mechanisms up, which I built a lot of. And it brings emotions because understanding my level of perfectionism is understanding another coping mechanism that I've had from my childhood. And during my many years of learning about myself and learning about my trauma, academically and through my own healing work, I have to say to you, it doesn't matter how far down your healing journey that you are, you're still going to be faced with more lessons. And it doesn't matter how evolved I am or how further I am along and how well I can teach others. There are still lessons in my healing that I have to go through. And if I were to deny that because I was now a teacher and I had learned everything I needed to learn and I got to focus on teaching, I wouldn't be able to empower my students. I wouldn't be able to empower other people to understand that your journey never ends. Your journey doesn't ever end. And if we believe that there's an ending point, we are running for something with a hope and an ideation that's where we're getting. Well, the only ending there ever really is death. Really, that's the only real ending. Because if you're human, and if you're human, 70% of humans have had trauma in childhood. They have had adverse childhood experiences. And there is something called the ACE quiz, which psychologists and psychiatrists work with to understand what level of things have you been through that have traumatized you. There is something that I've got to quickly say before I carry on, that when I'm working on YouTube and Facebook and with clients, I do Reels and Instagram and TikTok. That's a lie, I'm not even on Instagram anymore. But I'm on TikTok and I'm on YouTube under the Spiritual Hub. But the majority of things that I hear is, but I haven't been through any trauma. And what I like to challenge with that is, just because you haven't labelled something traumatic doesn't mean that it hasn't affected you. Trauma isn't the event, it's how that has affected your body. And when we've gone through things in childhood, it's been very normalised. It doesn't feel like trauma because it's normal. And it's not until you sit and realise what you went through in childhood, and again, I'm not here to bash parents, because there's lots of parents that will watch this will actually think, oh, I've done that. Because, you know, that was one of the realisations that I had to have through my healing. As a person that needed to heal, I was also a parent that was unhealed. So to empower my children to heal, I had to take ownership of my healing. I'm not perfect. My children have gone through things, my elder children have gone through things that they will need to heal from. And in our childhood, and I speak about this all the time because you know, you are your childhood. It is as simple as that. You could have extremely loving parents and know you're loved. That doesn't mean that things haven't affected you. And it doesn't even have to be at the extent of your parents. It could be school. It could be divorce. Now, nobody foresees divorce is going to affect children. We don't want that. But it does. Nobody foresees that mental health in a parent, that's not that parent's fault, it's going to affect the child. But it does. Parents go through a lot. And you know, I work with people who hate their parents, and I validate that. I once hated my parents. I also work with people who don't hate their parents, but have had to come out of some denial of some of the ways and behaviours that their parents exhibited that did affect them. Emotional unavailability, helicopter parenting, when they're trying to manage you and they're trying to look after you and they're trying to, and you know, help you, but they're doing it for you. Enabling parents, distant parents, reactive parents, non-reactive. You know, parenting, you don't get a manual. And it's very, very hard. But perfectionism comes from childhood trauma more often than not. And again, the reason why we don't get to label what is and what isn't childhood trauma, and in a previous video I've spoken about little t's and big T's, because we don't get to label, you know, what one person doesn't believe is traumatic, it's traumatic for another person. Again, because everyone is built differently. We have different levels of ways that we accept things. We have different levels of nervous system, genetic and non-genetic. You know, this is why spiritual, mind, body and soul needs Western medicine, needs therapy. We need all things like that, because you have to have a scientific understanding of the mind and body, but you also have to have a spiritual understanding that your soul and your body carries energy. You know, and how do we work together with all of that? And again, that's why I've come into this work. I've worked through shadow work, through inner child work, I've undertaken understandings around somatic therapy, reconnecting the mind, body and soul. So in this video, I'm just going to be talking about perfectionism, how I found out I had perfectionism and how it affected my life, and I didn't even realise. Just to ever be asked previously whether I had perfectionism, I'd say absolutely, hands down, no. But you know the thing about healing, and this is what I want to and have to specifically say to you, the thing about healing is you don't know it all at one time. When you start to open Pandora's box of healing and it starts to feel a bit painful, The divine cannot bring in everything that you need to heal, because you're not in that emotional space and capacity to take it all in. You would never be able to heal a whole amount of your traumas all in one. So what happens is, healing's a gradual process. Healing comes in stages, and what doesn't get fully healed and understood just changes form. And I'll explain that in a moment. If you don't fully heal something or understand something, which we can't at the beginning, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You can't straight away do that Rubik's Cube. You have to sit the Rubik's Cube, you have to feel it, you have to do it, you have to do it wrong, you have to do it wrong again, you have to turn it, and you have to feel it, and maybe you might cheat and research it, and then you might try it again, and then, in the end you might have done it. But then if you go back to doing it again, you might have to learn to do it a different way. It's like a Rubik's Cube. I used to look at my sister who had perfectionism, and I used to say to her, well, in my head, she's such a perfectionist. Actually, I'd say to her, you're such a perfectionist, you have such a need for perfection. Because I could see perfection tendencies, and they didn't fit what I believed was the box of perfectionism. So therefore, I didn't have perfectionism. I told myself I didn't have perfectionism because that box I see, she always was very, very strict with her diet. Everything had to have its place. She was very rigid with how people had to be. And that was just, glaringly perfectionism. And I felt for her. And I used to say to her, she wouldn't video new recordings and things because she didn't have the right lighting, the right things. And I would go, God, you've got perfectionism. You can heal that perfectionism. And I want to say to you, and this, it baffles me now, because I teach and I know that what you see in another is something you need to heal in yourself. Now, that's not always the case. If you're on a healing journey, that's not always the case, because there's things that you've healed. And that's what I believe that was. I believe, well, I know when something needs to be healed, and I know when something's showing that I need to heal it. I'm not a perfectionist. And it never entered my head that I was a perfectionist until Sunday, when I was triggered. Now, the trigger, and this is how perfectionism works. We label perfectionism being a certain way where everything has to have its place. I had OCD years and years ago, where I literally, my home had to be spotless, the children had to be spotless, how I dress had to be spotless, I had body dysmorphia. So for me, that's part of perfectionism. I realised that was part of perfectionism. Well, I didn't actually, I do now. I didn't at the time realise that was part of perfectionism. I just had to work on healing my body dysmorphia and healing my OCD. So it started off with body dysmorphia. Years and years and years, 4 showers a day. Changing my clothes so often, changing my hair, literally bleaching and changing my hair because I wanted to feel good, look good. People were judging me. I didn't look good enough. I wasn't thin enough. I was too thin. I was this. And how I started to heal my body dysmorphia, for when I shaved all my hair off, and I don't recommend you do that. But I did it because I had such a bad addiction with my hair that shaving it off was cathartic. It was very, very damaged. I had a very bad relationship with it. As soon as it grew, I bleached it. I had a very, because when I was 14, 15 and I was being sexually abused by my dad, I cut my hair off because I didn't want to feel feminine. And my hair was down here, like down here, and I cut it off. And I healed that. It took me many, many years. I had to bring it to my consciousness. I had to understand I had body dysmorphia. I was diagnosed, and it took a long time for me to understand I could heal that. I had to start loving my body, connecting to my body, feeling okay with putting on weight. I'm 2 stone bigger than I was. And I had to slowly start leaving my hair alone, building a better relationship with it. When I shaved it, it was the hardest thing I ever done. Hardest thing. I had short hair, pixie hair for years, but when I shaved it, I had no hair. It brought all of my insecurities and worries. And that's part of perfectionism, now I know. Now I am at this point of understanding I am a perfectionist. Now I understand the levels of perfectionism I've been healing. Now I understand. And I have such compassion for myself and love. And I say this because if you're starting to understand along your healing journey that there are layers. Again, if somebody said I was perfectionist, I said no. But now I'm starting to realise as I'm healing, because I have the tools. Because I'm learning the tools, because I teach the tools. I pick apart each time it happens, because we can never stop these things happening. We can't prevent triggers. What we can do is learn to heal them, and they become less and less and less. We can't prevent them, because we're here for healing and growing. So I started to heal my body dysmorphia. I no longer look at myself 1,000 times a day and tell myself how ugly I am. I no longer pick myself apart. I no longer wear 5 items of clothing a day. I no longer shower constantly. So that part had healed. Obviously, what isn't fully healed and understood, it wasn't fully healed. That level of my perfectionism was healed. So that was one layer of the onion. Years later, when I had my breakdown, I developed OCD. OCD meant my house had to be spotless. I literally had to have tea cooked on top. I had to have such a rigid... the kettle had to have a certain amount of water in it. My pots and pans had to face a certain way. Like, it dominated my life. It wasn't just my home. Like, I painted things 100 times. I literally was constantly replacing furniture and placing things the minute I thought it didn't look nice, or the minute I thought... And I was constantly finding fault. I couldn't have a cushion out of place. I had to have... It was, you know... And some people say, well, that isn't OCD. But it was OCD. You know, I was diagnosed with OCD. It was OCD. To the point I'm cleaning and bleaching, and my whole life is affected by the fact that I'm changing furniture, spending money on painting. I'm spending money on secondhand things. I even got myself into debt because I was so poorly of buying all this different furniture. You know, another part of perfectionism is addiction. I had a shopping addiction at one point. I had many addictions, but I had a shopping addiction. And so I started to heal that. I started to do exposure therapy on myself the more I started to get better. And I started to expose myself to not decorating so much. Now I don't decorate. I clean, but I don't over clean. We live in a home. And there is times where it would look a little bit dirty and I'd get anxiety again, and I would calm my nervous system down. I thought, okay, I've got this. Like, as time's gone, I've healed. Second layer of it. Second layer of my perfectionism. Sunday hit the third layer of understanding. Because obviously the first 2 layers, again, I didn't know were perfectionism. I just thought, you know, when you have mental health, so from childhood trauma, from childhood adverse situations, you know, a childhood adverse situation could be a car crash, it could be a death of a loved one. It doesn't have to be forms of abuse, and I have to say that. You know, it could be school bullying. There's lots of different things in childhood, and there isn't many children that have escaped those things. That's why understanding that these things are traumatic will really help you understand that this is not about feeling sorry for yourself or labelling you somebody who's a child of trauma. This is about coming into an awareness and an understanding of your body, and actually, why are you unhappy in life now? Why are you struggling? Why are you depressed? Why are you lost? Why are you feeling anxious? Most people who have perfectionism don't even know it. I see it, and I'm going to explain why. I'm just going to say to you, so Sunday, the trigger happened. I have had lots of worrying thoughts lately about I'm not good enough in my job. I'm a spiritual teacher, I coach, but I also have a daughter with ADHD and is on an ASD pathway. So they've not fully diagnosed her, but they have said she is on the spectrum. We're now, you know, so there's been stress. You know, I have been meditating. But when you don't understand what perfectionism is, you don't understand how it's affecting you. So I would sit there with constant worrying thoughts of, I've got to do more in my work. I've got to set up another course. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Now, bearing in mind, perfectionism isn't just one aspect. There are 3 parts of perfectionism. There is a social part, how you want other people to be a certain way, how you want people to treat you, how you want people to act, how you know, even to how you want people to dress. How you know, very judgmental, you believe, you know, you have high morals. That's a form of perfectionism. Then there's the job part, which is I'm not good enough, I'm not going to achieve, I'm not going to be able to get a pay rise, I'm not going to be able to go for higher, I wouldn't be able to do all those hours, I wouldn't be able to take it on, I should be doing more, I don't even think I know my job. I'm going to move that. And then there's the social, the social part of perfectionism, how friends treat us, how we think friends should be, So for me, because I didn't fit what I believed in the category of perfectionism, I've been having lots of worrying thoughts of how much I should be putting into my business. Obviously, this stresses the nervous system. This heightens the nervous system. That's what perfectionism does. It's overthinking, it's worrying, it's focusing and not being in the here and now. It's things could be different, things should be different. And because I had anxiety, I thought, well, this is a form of anxiety. Well, of course, perfectionism is a form, it creates anxiety. So what I did is I was constantly in battle. I was calming myself down, but then heightening myself and not realizing. I kept feeling in this cycle. I'm calming myself down, I'm relaxing myself, and I'm heightened again. I'm heightened again because something hasn't been put back in the drawer. It's not OCD because it wasn't impacting my life, but I'm heightened again because he's ignored me to not put something in the drawer. Then he's whistling. Then he's emotionally not connecting to me, my partner. Then he's shutting down. Now this is all triggering me. Because what's happening is my perfectionism has been underrunning. And because I didn't know I had perfectionism, I've had all these thoughts that I'm suppressing, bringing up. And as a teacher, I know you're supposed to feel them, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what was happening. I knew I was feeling my body. I knew, but what was happening is, it was waiting. It was waiting for the right time to surface. And I, as a teacher, know that more than anything. When you have faith in your journey, your lessons will show when you're ready. When you have faith in your journey, and sometimes I'm so impatient. I want to know now what is going on. What is my journey? Why is my head whirring? But I just had to go with the flow. And on Sunday, it showed itself to me. I flipped. I was triggered. My partner, who has characteristics of my father, because when you don't become aware of the unhealed pain that you have from childhood, you pick partners that are similar to your parents. So when I met my partner, I wasn't fully healed, so I picked somebody who's like my dad, emotionally unavailable and unable to deal with emotions, unable to deal with conflict. So when something happens, he shuts down and goes aloof. And because I've healed majoritarily, I can handle that. I understand that's what he's doing. I can give him space or we can talk. But I was triggered. Because underlyingly, my perfectionism was boiling. This work has been hard because I've put so much pressure on myself, spiritual work. It's evolving, but I want to do more, and I want to do more, and I want to do more. And I didn't realise that was perfectionism. I didn't realise that perfectionism is so interchangeable. And I ask you to research more in depth about how perfectionism may be affecting your life, because it isn't just a one thing. And Sunday I was triggered and I blew and I shouted and I screamed and I cried and I punched him in the arm and I slammed the door and I told him he had to leave, and I've not done that in a very, very, very long time. And look, we normalise that in society. We normalise getting to those levels, don't we? But they're not healthy levels. And I've known that for a long time, hence why I was healing them. Because when you start to heal, you have to realise what's normalised isn't healthy. It's normalised for people to shut down. It's normalised for conflict and screaming and shouting to happen. And it can every now and again, but it's not healthy if you don't understand why it's happening. And I had to give myself love and compassion. I've done this. Something's happened. I'm triggered. Why am I triggered? That morning, I had a memory of my father. Of when he was shouting at me that I wasn't good enough. And how shit a person I was. That memory, I felt, and I was like, right, okay, it's obviously come in for something. Didn't realise how interlinking it all was. Had that memory, so I was storing stress from that memory. But this needed to happen, so we have to allow things to happen. That memory happened, I flipped my lid, and then I cried for the rest of the day. But what I was crying for an understanding. Please lead me to understand why this has just happened. Because in my other videos, if you go to other videos on my page, I will teach you how to emotionally regulate. Because going so up and so down is not healthy. That's a trauma response. When we're flipping our lid regularly, this is a trauma response. Okay, this isn't normal. Well, it is normal, it's been normalised. Parents do it, people do it, but it's an unhealthy trauma response. We haven't learnt emotional regulation, and it doesn't bring peace. I'm not here to shame anybody. I did it for years, but it doesn't bring peace to us. It doesn't bring conflict resolution. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of arguing and screaming and shutting down and apologising, arguing and screaming and shutting down and apologising, and that doesn't resolve anything. And I asked the Spirit to show me the way, because I knew there was something I needed to heal. Again, we can't heal it all at once. And the words failure come into my head. Yeah. I sat with that one and I thought, yeah, I have a deep fear of failure. Because I've never really been good at anything. But now I know I have, but for many years I felt I hadn't. I didn't finish school because I was bullied so bad and home life was so bad. I moved away and lived with my nan and trying to cope in ways of trying to be a really nice person, but holding such anger because of the things I've been through. And I struggled with friendships for a very long time. Till I was about 30, I struggled with friendships, 33, 34 even. I struggled with friendships. I'm 40 now, and I've only had fulfilling friendships in the last 5 to 6 years. So 34. So I was all over the place. I trained for hairdressing, but I made myself stay at college for 2 extra years to train to be a hairdresser, and I believed that that was a good thing. I made myself believe that that meant that I did that because obviously I wanted to make sure that I really knew what I was doing, because I was too scared to just go out and do it. Perfectionism. I didn't trust in myself. I didn't trust in my ability. I didn't have enough self-worth. So I made myself stay at college because I kept flouncing and I kept saying, they said, no, you're ready to go. And I said, no, I don't want to. I want to stay. I stayed there another 18 months, not 2 years, another 18 months. I continued, kept making myself fail because I wanted to make sure I was learning more and learning more. Part of perfectionism is you'll struggle to take on new things. You think you've got to learn more. You think you don't know enough. You always think you need to know more. And this doesn't, perfectionism affects everyone in a different way. I look back now and I think, well, that's been me right up until 3 weeks ago. I read book after book on trauma, on therapy, on healing, on growing, on attachment theory, on psychology, on spiritual, because I didn't believe I was good enough, and I didn't realise that. It didn't matter how many times I was telling myself, look how well you're doing. I clearly, subconsciously didn't believe I was good enough still. And that's why this has happened. So I sat there with the thoughts and feelings of failure. And I thought, well, I can't have a feeling of failure because I try new things. I'm always trying new things. But I give them up quickly too. As soon as I don't think they're going to succeed, I give them up. That's perfectionism. Because you don't feel, every time you're not getting the recognition or you're not getting. And when I sit with this now, it's so clear. And this is how healing is. When I sit with it now, it's so clear that that was what was happening. But as a teacher, I had to go through it. And I want to empower you to understand. Your lessons are going to show gradually. So as this is unfolding, I can see, well, I don't mind starting new things, but guess what? Unless I feel pretty certain that's going to do well, or I've got enough drive, I'm going to pull out of it. Patreon pulled out of it. Spiritual coaching many times pulled out of it. I'm doing it now. But perfectionism isn't at its worst now, but I needed to clearly have it brought to my awareness because it's been self-sabotaging me. Because perfectionism has been seeing me putting so much pressure on myself of who I think I should be. And I understand about persona and authenticity, and I have lived in what I believe is authentic self, but there was still a part of me that couldn't shake off this feeling of why am I getting, it's anxiety, calm yourself down. But I had to obviously bring it to my awareness that there was a perfectionism there. Where does perfectionism come from? It comes from low self-esteem. It comes from childhood, quite often with parents or people around you who didn't leave you feeling supported, who didn't leave you feeling loved. Now, I had an emotionally unavailable parent. Both my parents were emotionally unavailable. And the only way I got their praise was how well I did in the Air Cadets. And I see that now. How good I was at home. How well I did. And all the times that I let them down when I got pregnant young. And I failed school. Because they had learnt to base success on external things. And this is why I talk about things like perfectionism. When we understand that these are parts of things that we have, we can start bringing them to the unconscious and we can start working with them. Part of my perfectionism seen me retake a video 100 times and then say I was shit and I shouldn't be doing YouTube or I shouldn't be doing TikTok because, you know, that's obviously not what I'm meant to do. Because I was a perfectionist. And some people may say, well, this is clearly perfectionism tendencies. But listen, we can only heal what we need to heal at each time. I didn't need to understand what perfectionism was because I didn't believe I had it. I was learning and healing what I needed to heal at each time. I can't know it all. So for people just to call teachers out and things, well, you should have known that. There's no such thing as a should-haves. We're all on a journey of learning and understanding. We only know what we know when we know it. And we don't learn it until we need to learn it. Period. And the people that are calling other people out and saying, well, you should have known this, you should have done this, you should have done that, they're perfectionists because they believe that another has to be a certain way. And they don't realise they're perfectionists. We're living in a world of perfectionism. People believe that they have to work 40, 50 hours a week and that. They wear their perfectionism with a badge. And I didn't realise this. I was holding myself hostage towards these other people who were working till 12 at night on their businesses because they wanted to get them off the ground. And part of me knew about feminine energy because obviously I'm a spiritualist and I understand about being receptive to energy, but I was constantly in battle. What was I in battle with? Understanding my energy and about being receptive to feminine energy and, you know, the being and not the doing, but my trauma responses were still there. There was still a trauma response because I didn't feel good enough in childhood. I was seeking validation in adulthood, but I wasn't outwardly seeking it so obviously that I knew it was validation. I was doing it by having to believe that creating certain things had to be of a standard that other people applauded me for, that were good, that were okay. The reason why I have perfectionism is because I have fear of failure. So I don't, you know, when I talk about, again, the 3 types of perfectionism, we just label one type, don't we? We label that everything has its place, you have to be perfect at things. Well, I didn't have to be perfect at things. I knew that being authentic means I was going to mess up, I was going to swear on life. So I didn't have that. So when I didn't have that symbolic part of perfectionism, I just didn't get it. I didn't look into it because I wasn't meant to at that time. But the part of perfection that I do have is I hold myself to such high standards of how things should be, while having empathy for myself. So can you see the inner conflict there? How perfectionism can cause conflict? Because when you're healing, you will know that, well, it's okay to rest. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay. So then you have that. And then when you're a little bit stressed, that's when the perfectionism can kick in. Some people have perfectionism underriding foundationally. But with me, the perfectionism wasn't there all of the time. It wasn't there all of the time because I had a deep awareness of acceptance. I had awareness of, you know, the being and the feminine energy. When it did come in is when I put stress on myself. When did I put stress on myself? When I believed I needed to be a certain way. When I believed my success was based on how many videos I'm getting out on YouTube. When I believed my success was what people thought of me sometimes on Facebook. When I believed success, I don't believe this now, was numbers. You know, I used to believe that I had 36,000 followers. Wow, other people have got 50,000. Yeah, but I'm a completely different person. I can talk about completely different things. I'm in a completely different genre, and even if I wasn't, it's not the basis of your success. When you come from a childhood or early adolescence or experiences that you have low self-worth in, you will strive to build a sense of self. Means that you may be a perfectionist. You carry guilt. You carry guilt that you're not a certain mother. You carry guilt. You know, the guilt is probably something different, but you just carry guilt. You're an all or nothing type of person. You're all in with friendships or you're all not. You're all in with your work, you're loving it, everything's great, or you're not putting as much in. There's, you know, in all aspects of your life, relationships, you're all in or you're not. You don't like to try new things, or when you do try them, you don't give them long enough to grow. You try it and you think, oh my God, I'm going to fail, so you pull out. You know, relationships, friendships, new jobs. There's a procrastinator in you. There's an overthinker in you. You don't know that you don't feel good enough, but you just think you're trying to save yourself. So what you'll do is you'll say, well, I can't take that many hours on at work because actually I've got a child, and what if something goes wrong? You know, you live in the future. What if something goes wrong? Perfectionists, we're holding ourselves to such a high standard. Perfectionism seeps in all aspects. And it's really hard for me to define in one way what perfectionism is, because for me, perfectionism crept in with, trying to hold myself so accountable with my work that I become a workaholic. And everyone was saying, you work so much, you work so much. And I'm like, well, of course you work so much, because you've got to do that. You've got to put so much in your business for it to, but then I also know when to relax. So even though I also knew when to relax, when I wasn't relaxing and I was working, the thoughts and feelings that I kept having, I didn't understand where they come from. I was like, you need to create another course. Yeah, I need to create another course. Actually, you need to run 2 courses. Okay, well, you don't need to do this, you need to do that. Oh, does my intuition say that? So there's always been that little bit of conflict. And this is why the divine and the universe has brought this up for me now, because I'm holding myself back with it. I was scared of being a failure. I was scared of looking a failure. And failure doesn't mean that something doesn't succeed. It means that you don't become who you think you should be. When really that trauma response was because as a child, I craved love. I craved different forms of attention. As a child, I didn't feel good enough. I definitely wasn't academic in all aspects. I was really academic in English. I didn't get to nurture that. I was academic in some aspects and not others. But I would always focus on what I wasn't academic in. I always focus on what I couldn't do. And that's a little bit like, no. I focus on how well I haven't done something. Why do YouTube when there's loads of other people in YouTube? What's the point? What makes you any different? But yet I know I have confidence. I know I have a strong sense of self-worth. So that was the part of healing that needed to come in. That's why the childhood wound showed itself. And this is how we can recognise from triggers something that needs to be healed. I've learned over time to listen to myself when a trigger happens, but many people don't. Many people get triggered, know they've been triggered, then they feel shame, and then they pull back in, and then they just carry on with life normally because they're scared to face a trigger because of the shame they felt. And I want to invite you to go, a trigger is an extreme emotional response to something that didn't warrant it. So what was happening on Sunday didn't warrant me screaming. Didn't warrant me slamming my hand in a door because I was so stressed and I just slammed the door on my hand. It didn't warrant that. But I had so many feelings I've not felt in such a long time. So that was triggered. What was I triggered? Okay, I was triggered part by the fact that my partner was not listening to me. The fact that my partner, okay, but I haven't been triggered by that in a long time. But your dad used to do it, you're okay. But am I feeling pressure with anything else? Yeah, I'm feeling pressure with thinking I'm not where I want to be with my work. Could do more, could be more. So you see what I'm saying about the conflict? In one breath I had acceptance and understanding and was okay, but in another breath this unhealed wound was gnawing away at me. Because it didn't matter how much acceptance I had, it didn't matter how much I worked on my self-esteem, until that little understanding of my perfectionism come in, how could I heal it? But now, when those thoughts are going to come in, which they're going to because they're not healed yet, but I have a conscious awareness of them, I can sit with them. When I'm telling myself I need to create another course, even though I'm doing a course, I'm on live, I'm doing YouTube and I'm raising 5 children. High expectations of myself. Cooking dinner, tidying the house. No one's supporting me, martyr. Okay, well Vicky, people are supporting you. No, I have high expectations for what I want to achieve. Because guess what? It's based on the fact that I didn't feel supported in childhood. And not only that, I had constant relationships that didn't reinforce that I was good enough. Relationships, when we choose them with people that want to grow with us, not perfect people, but people that want to grow with us, can actually reinforce good connections. And what that does is it heals attachments. And I'm so grateful that I've got to learn this about myself. And I want to share this with you because there's so much that you can learn about yourself. There is so much that you can learn about yourself when you go through triggers. And you think, well, how do I pick that apart? You sit with yourself. Sit with yourself, and the more that you sit with yourself when these things happen, the more that you will start to understand each time where things are coming from, and you will start to, reach out to people like me, comment on this. Sorry if you can hear my dog. Normally my perfectionist in me would have got anxious, turned off this recording and got my dog out. But my dog's asleep. It's a bit snoring. Normally I wouldn't look away from the camera because I'd feel like I'd need to be glued. Normally I'd be scared if I stuttered a little bit because I do stutter when I'm nervous. But this is going to set me free to a next level. And I know that awareness like this within you can set you free. If you have connected to anything of what I'm saying, research perfectionism. How, does perfectionism affect you in any way? Because with knowledge is power, and I'm not crying because I'm sad, I'm crying because I'm feeling, and it's so normal. And we've unnormalised crying as if that person's feeling sorry for themselves, as if that person's a drama queen. We are allowed to feel. We are allowed to feel. And I'm feeling compassion and love for myself, and I'm feeling a bit of a sense of relief. I felt a relief because there's another layer of myself I understand. And that's how healing works. And that's why reaching out to teachers like me, reaching out to teachers on Facebook, don't ever be afraid to ask people questions. You don't have to pay for a question with people. People like myself who truly want to help you because we have been there, want to help you because we are learning. We can't help you at the extent of ourselves, and we can't, give everything away for free. I have to charge and I have to, make money. This is my work. But does that mean I can't support people and give them knowledge and send them in the right direction and give them a bit of stuff? Absolutely not. Because I have been you. I am you. We are all one. And what one person goes through, so does another. Perfectionism is rife within society right now. Why? You've got people working 40, 50 hours a week, believing that that's what they need to do to be a good person. That's what they need to do to be a supportive person, to be somebody who brings in the money. They give up on their dreams because doing anything that means they've got to lose a bit of money or lose a bit of hours means that they are not providing for their family. Perfectionism means that people believe that we've got to have tea done, baths done, homework done, that we've got to hold such high standards for what a sense of living is. Perfection is eating away at society. Perfection is that we have to look good. And then perfection is, I don't give a shit what people think, I'm going to be me, but then you feel shame and guilt for it. Perfection gnaws at people in so many different ways. And not everyone has a perfection tendency, but loads more people have it than they ever believe. And it gnaws at us. It gnaws at that sense of self. It creates conflict. And when your body and your mind is in conflict, you'll never truly reach your full potential. That's probably why I was always like, why am I so stressed? I don't do readings all the time anymore. I'm teaching, I've got more time. Yet whenever I found more time, I created more things to do that were meaningless. Because I needed to give myself meaning. I needed to feel like I was active, and I needed to feel like I was doing something. The busyness trap. And I have a video of the busyness trap. And again, I want to say to you, start your healing by coming out of denial that your life is okay. If you're depressed, if you're sad, if you're down, I'm sorry to say there's something that needs healing. If you're feeling lost, if you're getting angry a lot, if you're suppressing feelings, if you're struggling in friendships, relationships, you're struggling being a mother or a father, you're struggling with yours, there's something that needs healing. And how we start that is, firstly, we come out of denial and we say, yes, something needs healing. Then we start looking at people like me. Start looking at YouTube channels. Start looking at start exploring inner child work. Start exploring, understanding some of your coping mechanisms. Go back through some of my videos, look at some of my things. And again, I'll be putting more videos up as my healing journey grows. This is just the beginning for me on YouTube. I wanted to give up because you think you're never going to succeed at anything. But that's part of perfectionism. I'm hoping that I haven't rambled. I'm just aiming, especially, it's so weird how my last video was talking about I want to be more at peace behind the camera, and since then it's all transpiring where it's come from. That's how healing happens. I didn't know then that I was a perfectionist Again, if somebody said to me, you're a perfectionist, I said, no, I'm not. But I'd also say I don't know everything, and I might have explored it. But no one ever told me it. But no one ever told me because it wasn't glaringly obvious. Because it was something that was gnawing away, and that's what healing is, it's gnawing away. And I say to you guys, don't fear, don't think, oh my God, there's so much in me I need to heal. Because each door will open the more you go through doors. You go through a door, you heal something, and then you go through another door. Start to heal your emotions and emotional regulation. Then it will take you through another door, learning maybe attachments and how you attach to people. Then it will take you through another door, understanding coping mechanisms and, you know, how you've learned to cope that are unhealthy. Then it will take you through another door, learning how to reconnect with people, learning how to build better bonds. Then it will take you through another door, learning boundaries. Do you see what I mean? The doors will open for you, so don't feel overwhelmed. But if you've come by this video, that's because there's something in it you need to hear. And it's nature and nurture. Something that you've learned from family. You know, if your parents... My mum was a huge perfectionist when I look back. And that's where I thought my sister got it from. My mum had OCD so severely. And I didn't even realise that OCD, perfectionism, body dysmorphia and all that interlinked. You know, and I work with understanding mental health, but again, there is not one mental health practitioner that knows it all. I work with trauma-informed therapy. There isn't one trauma-informed therapist that knows it all. And it's when we sit there and we say, we don't know it all, is when we're opening to learning. And that's what I come from. I come from a place, Bella. I come from a place of wanting to say to you, I don't know it all. But what I do know, I know can help you. Because it helped me, it transformed my life. I'm in an amazing place in my life. This may have happened, but I'm still in an amazing place. Is everything good all the time? No. I live in acceptance and understanding. But that doesn't mean that there's things that are not underlying that I won't have to keep learning to heal. And I will keep bringing them to you. And I'm hoping this has helped you in some way understand some things. I do have a fear of rabbiting on because sometimes I go off topic. But I also have a faith that what I'm meant to say, what Spirit want me to say to you, and actually, I'm going to sit with this for a minute because a perfectionist in me would say, you're not good enough, you haven't said enough, you haven't done this, you haven't hit these points, you haven't done those points. But I've got to start living with the fact that good is good enough majority of the time, and what I'm meant to say and what I'm meant to get across to you, I'm meant to do it, and you're meant to hear it. And if there is any questions, and I could never ever cover every aspect of it in one video anyway, so I may have to revisit this the more I understand the impacts, understanding the intricacies. But that's what this channel was about. This channel was about you and me connecting and sharing this thing called fucking life, this journey called life that we are all on. We're not getting off this roller coaster, so we just have to learn healthy and safely and amazing ways to ride it. So again, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback for me, one thing I used to struggle with before I end is feedback. And that's a form of perfectionism. If anyone gave me feedback, I would have felt it was a personal attack. And actually, as I've started to heal, that was part I was really growing with. And I didn't realise it was a form of perfectionism. I was starting to sit comfortably with feedback, which I didn't get an awful lot, but when I did get it, I had to determine what was feedback and what was trolls. Because we can say, well, everything's a troll, but it's not. Some things are just really feedback. But you have to also understand who's giving you the feedback. But I'm open to feedback. And once upon a time, I'd take it as a personal attack. But now I'm understanding all of what I've been healing has been levels of perfectionism that I'm now being able to label and understand was perfectionism. I'm hoping that you're okay. Please do follow me on YouTube. You're on my YouTube channel, but follow me on YouTube if you don't already. I do put meditations up. I connect to my body through meditations, and I want to bring them to you to be able to connect to your body through them. Do follow me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, which is called The Spiritual Hub, where I do lives. I also do run spiritual coaching, 6-week course, spiritual coaching, where I help. So the coaching that I'm doing at the moment is awakening your soul. But obviously, if you're wanting more details on that, then please do contact me and we can talk about that. So I will put my telephone number underneath where you can contact me on WhatsApp, and I will put a link underneath to contact me. Thank you for watching. I'm hoping that you've enjoyed connecting with me and allowing me to have space to connect with you and share with you another part of my journey and another part of probably what is your journey also. Mwah!